Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes. Please lead us off.
What did you find was the total amount paid to McKinsey?
During the period under audit, it was approximately $200 million that was spent on contracts awarded to McKinsey and Company.
Since the period of 2015 to the end of your audit period, what was the amount of money paid to McKinsey?
I'm going to look to Nick here, but I believe that before 2015, it was about $8.6 million. So the difference would be after that date. That's accurate?
That's right. So about 191 million.
191 million. So of the $200 million since Justin Trudeau's NDP Liberal government came to power, that's the accounting of that $200 million to their preferred supplier, McKinsey. Up until today, we'd been told that government payments to McKinsey were $100 million, but you've accounted for a number that's twice that amount. Can you tell me what the total amount of non-competitive contract payments were that were made to McKinsey?
Why is our number almost double? So we are the first organization looking into McKinsey contracts that can bring in the Crown Corporation. So prior to my audit, the Comptroller General's office asked all the internal audit departments to do work, and then the procurement ombuds as well did some work. Both can only do work on departments and agencies. And so the increase in contracts to McKinsey is by adding in the 10 Crown corporations. So that's what brought it to where it's at. There was about 71% of the contracts that were issued on a non-competitive basis. They represent 118 million of contract awards. For actual spend, I'll have to see if Nick has that number, or we might have to get back to you.
I don't have it to hand, but we can get back to you with that.
So can you just break that down, what it means to have a non-competitive contract? So are other companies allowed to bid in those situations for the $117 million that went to McKinsey?
So I think it's important to say that the procurement rules in the Federal Public Service encourage a competitive contract at the outset. A competitive contract should help improve the chances that you get better value for money when you bring more players to the table and that you get better services. Non-competitive contracts, however, are allowed. There are certain exceptions. They are usually when it's a low dollar value, or when only one vendor is able to provide the service, or if there's a pressing need to issue a contract, or finally, if having a procurement process, a public one, would not be in the best interest. So one of those exceptions when it comes to departments and agencies needs to be properly justified, and what we found is that was often not the case. It was not properly justified.
So the number you said was 71%?
Yes, 71% of the 97 contracts. So that would include contracts issued by Crown corporations as well as departments.
That's certainly not 71% is not an exception. That seems like the rule. When we're 71% isn't an edge case, and the other criteria that you mentioned were that the contracts be of low dollar value. We're talking about more than 100 million, 117 million, I think you said, in terms of contracts. So where the government's preferred contractor, the Trudeau government's preferred contractor, McKinsey, benefited greatly. I want to turn to Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. We know that as the $1 billion green slush fund. We've heard damning testimony from whistleblowers. We heard one of the most senior officials from the ministry responsible from the Justin Trudeau government say that, quote, a sponsorship scandal level kind of giveaway, end quote, comparing it to the Liberal government in the early 2000s and the scandals at that time. With 90 conflicts of interest uncovered, what was the total value paid out in those cases where you found the conflict of interest was present?
I'm gonna. So we, when we looked at Sustainable Development Technologies Foundation, we found really significant lapses in governance and stewardship of public funds. There was poorly managed conflicts of interest. There was $59 million awarded to contracts that we believe are ineligible. The 90 cases that you refer to are 90 cases that the records of the foundation indicate where there was a conflict of interest, where a member of the board participated in the discussion and then voted on the awarding of a contract, and it represents about $76 million. Now, it doesn't mean that the award wouldn't have happened, but you just don't know what would have happened if individuals had properly recused themselves.
Right, so you covered 2 points there. $76 million paid out in the 90 cases of
Appel au
conflicts of
règlement.
interest.
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Oui, Madame Secrétaire.
Il n'y a plus d'interprétation depuis au moins 1 minute.
Okay.
Désolé.
I will continue to talk here. Could you let me know when you begin to hear my words in French? We need, obviously. Mr. Baird, I'll give you time to restart. Again, about 10, 15 seconds. Go ahead, in addition to the time you have.
With the 90 conflicts of interest that you uncovered, you talked about the $76 million that represents. That's conflicts of interest by directors that were handpicked by the Trudeau government, who then picked the remaining directors on the board. So these are insiders, and the insiders finding themselves in 90 cases of conflict of interest. You also mentioned, Madam Auditor General, $59 million in ineligible payments. Those are ones that didn't meet the criteria, didn't meet the rules of the contribution agreement between the government and the fund. You also found 37 terminated or canceled projects worth $154 million with $35 million spent. What happened to that money?
So this was one of those lapses in stewardship of public funds by the foundation. The foundation had a process in place to look at milestone monitoring, and there they found out that some organizations were submitting expenditures that were not eligible. Rightfully so, they canceled the contract. What was missing in the governance of these public funds is that the foundation should then have informed the federal government so that an adjustment could be made to future funding to the foundation, or that steps could be taken to recover
Was
those
the money
funds.
recovered? Was the money recovered?
That would be a question to ask the foundation. At times, they did reduce the funding received, but this is really a lapse in the board's oversight on managing prudent funds.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett,